So thinking about the absolute pleasure of being right. It's that moment when someone realizes that you were right. And it isn't always, a big deal. Sometimes it just shows up as a look or as a pause. And they know you're right. And they know they're wrong. And maybe they're not entirely wrong, but you're definitely right. It can hit in the middle of a conversation or later when something plays out the way you said it would. And it doesn't have to be dramatic, but it's there. And it's a kind of a quiet, full tummy satisfaction. And you really feel it in the body. And that's something that I've been noticing lately, that feeling of being right and how quickly it shows up and how it can linger. And once you start paying attention, you really begin to see a kind of delight that a lot of people share in being right. It's sort of everywhere. What's actually happening in the moment? There is something that is underneath that feeling. And it's not just about getting the facts correct. It's about what being correct says about you. And it says you're somebody who notices and you're somebody who understands complexity, perhaps. Maybe somebody who sees the big picture. And, the feeling that comes from that is not exactly pride, but it it is like a confirmation, it's like a quiet yes, yes. I've still got it. My view still holds together. And the story, you're telling yourself about being the kind of person who sees things clearly is still good. It's still a good one. And Carl Jung would call that part of us the ego. And oftentimes we think of the ego as an inflated sense of self. And that's not actually accurate. It has to do with the image that we carry of ourselves, so it's the center of self-awareness and the one inside who thinks of me as me. And that image really wants to feel whole and it wants to feel complete, quite understandably. It wants to feel competent, maybe even a little bit noble. So, being right helps with that. And it it really stitches things together and it stabilizes the frame. And there's nothing vain about wanting stability. That is our scaffolding. And the scaffolding can often be more fragile than it looks. But when our self image starts to depend upon being right, then that's when things have shifted over, and something in us has begun to tighten and become rigid. And, that can be subtle at first, but it starts to shape what we notice, and what we're willing to let in, and oftentimes, what we're tuning out. And so it's acting like an adaptive filter, and it is protecting the version of reality that lets us feel coherent. But think about the last time you changed your mind about something important, something that you could consider an organizing principle, and that would be big stuff, that could be political stuff, that could be faith-based, that could be the way that you view someone that you hold dear. So if you've changed your mind about something big like that, that was not a casual thing. And it could have very well felt like you were losing your footing. And certainly that's not failure, that's just the mind protecting its internal coherence. So, we're building filters, and we must to a degree, because we need to keep things stable. And there is an extraordinary amount of noise out there in this world. And so those filters are doing us a favor. And the thing is, though, we tend to, once we have those filters in place, we tend to start aligning with the things that we already believe. So that's what's getting through the filter, the things that we already believe. And we will lean towards voices that reinforce the shape of what we already know. We'll notice the articles that confirm us, and we share the clips that, hit that note, and we'll scroll past the rest. And, this whole confirmation bias thing really creeps in. And it's more than just getting things right. We're sometimes we're doing that to reinforce the sense of self that absolutely must be right, the one who sees things clearly. And that sometimes plays out when you're in online disputes and you see people just bringing the facts into the conversation, and they're dropping articles and this and that and the other. And you sometimes wonder if that is really going to sway anyone's mind, if there is another way to approach it than simply saying, this is right, this is right. And obviously, what I'm presenting is right. So certainly that can feel like a type of strength when you're doing that, when you can drop the facts. And to be doubtful can feel like a weakness. And curiosity risks being wrong, and asking questions, truly asking them. You set yourself up to maybe get an answer you didn't expect. And so those things can tend to fade. And we will not ask questions sincerely in good faith. That's the type of thing you're not looking for the shift. You're defending your image. The parts of us that don't fit that image, which are doubt and confusion and the possibility that we're wrong, those parts get pushed aside, or they get pushed onto somebody else. And that's what we would call projection. And that's the type of thing that shows up as our defensiveness will be called their stubbornness, and our unsettledness becomes their ignorance. And it is a sometimes subtle move, but it's a powerful tool, because it allows us to preserve the idea of ourselves as the rational, clear-headed, and informed ones, even when we're not. And the more we do that, the more we can convince ourselves that we're the ones who see clearly, even when we don't. And if enough of us build our lives around that feeling, that need to be right, we are no longer, this isn't just a personal concern. It starts to shape the culture. Each of us is curating our sense of what's right, and we're choosing news that matches it, and spending time with people who agree, and tuning the rest out. And at first it's not deliberate, it's just sort of habitual, but it becomes comfortable to stay in the know. And before long, we're not in a shared reality anymore with people who are not inside of our echo chambers and our curated realities. Pick the term, they both work. And each reality feels self-evident from the inside, and each one loops back and confirms itself. And so that personal need to be right has built walls, and those walls become worldviews, and they become teams and narratives that the narratives of the other cannot penetrate those walls. If you don't share my narrative, you're not coming in, into this zone, whatever that is. So that's where our polarization begins to really take root. Well, okay, we've got it. What do we do with all this? And honestly, after everything I've said, it would feel a little tone deaf if I said that I had a clear answer. I'm still grappling with this one. I'm still grappling with letting go of being right, especially when it feels good. And I don't think it's a one-time thing. Oh, it's more like a repetitive, slow noticing. So you might catch yourself mid-rant, realizing you're more invested in being right than in being in relationship. Or you get that feeling, that little swell, that sort of hit of reward. It's a reward when somebody agrees with you. And you might say, wait, is that my ego getting a treat? Right? Just really ask that question, because sometimes it is. And that's where it starts. It doesn't start with declarations, but with small embodied check-ins. And you want to know, this feels good, but why does it feel good? Do I still have curiosity here? And in conversation, am I defending a version of myself again? So the practice is not to stop having opinions. It's not to stop wanting to put forth right information. It's just to have that stuff and hold it with looser hands. There's a saying that the river doesn't wait. That is a pattern that most of us know. So we can be in our 20s and think, this is obvious, we've got it figured out. And then we might, at 30, begin to question it. And by 40, we realize we're just getting started, and so on. And if we're lucky, we don't just trade one rigid belief for another. And as we mature, we begin to soften. So Heraclitus said, you never step in the same river twice. As the water is moving, but so do you. So this means clarity is not something that locks in place. It's only something that we meet, and we meet it again and again. And so I think that's why not clinging too tightly to things and too tightly to being right. It's not because what we ever believe is false. It's because that if we're calling it the final right, this is it. And in some ways it means it's finished. There's nothing else to know about it. And the world is obviously still moving, and so are we. So, maybe the practice is not so much about, oh, I must never try to be that person again. No, that being right. But it's about remembering that we're standing in a moving river, and the river's not waiting. But, if we can stay curious and if we can make a little bit more room for uncertainty, there's something really spacious in that. It's much freer. Perhaps liberating is the better word. Something to consider.